Welcome to Confessions of a Cyber Psychologist. I am Carolyn Freeman, and today I am chatting with Mel Sellick about human-AI interactions and psychology's role in digital tech. Mel is an applied psychologist working at the intersection of AI and human well-being. She helps organizations understand how emerging technologies are reshaping trust, autonomy, and daily decision-making, and she serves on Harvard's AI for Human Flourishing Council and collaborates with Oxford's AI in Education Hub. Welcome, Mel. I'm so delighted to have you on board.
Oh, it's so great to be here, Caroline. Great to see you today.
Mel, you've got a really interesting journey, but before we get chatting about the work and research you do, can you tell me a little bit more about who you are and what that pivot point was that sent you down the road of psychology and human AI interactions?
I was thinking about this the other day, and I feel like I was one of those people who always was incredibly interested in the human story, in the internal life that we live, like the ways that we think and how we become who we are, versus the storyline and the narrative that we put out in the world, sort of this representation of us. So I was one of those kids, very strange, very odd, always writing for hours and hours and hours, and really just kind of dissecting my own story, the stories of the people around me, and getting my psychology today sent to the house at age 12. So that gives you any indication of what a total weirdo I was. Yeah. And so then I went into journalism. I ended up wanting to make story and narrative my life because I was always so intrigued by there are literally billions of ways to live our lives, right? And so pursued a career in media. I was a live broadcast journalist for NBC for the majority of my career. And really everything is about stories and how we connect through stories, which is sort of, I think, the most ancient art form, right?
I think that's the thing is that we tell stories, and before the written word, you talked about history and you talked about and your culture and who you were by the stories we told each other. And you'd sit around a campfire and listen to the stories, and that's how you remember your history and where you come from and who you are, is through the stories we tell each other. Stories we tell ourselves as well.
Exactly. You know, I mean, there's this line I've always loved, that the stories we tell most often are what we become. And I think also we become our stories in our social networks, right? In the relationships, in the telling of the story. That's how you know me, right? That's how I communicate with you. That's how you let me into your world also. So I think at the end of the day, everything is about that story. And so that's really what led me down the road to psychology to begin with, to media, to being a communications consultant, and ultimately to actually going back to school very late in my life, getting my master's, specializing, really looking at how technology impacts human behavior in society, and then on to my doctoral research, which is also looking at that. So this, not only the human to human interaction and storylines, but the narratives between human and AI.
And that kind of leads me on to the next thing I was going to ask you about, is because we hear a lot about how AI, or the narratives around how AI is going to steal people's jobs. And although the innovation shifts, and also innovation is shifting how we're going to work and how we will work, I think the future of work means we all need to be a bit more adaptable. But I think there's a real narrative around the stealing of jobs, rather than as technology and AI being a help and the way that we progress through the future. It's almost like the mass media has brought on the scare story and makes us very afraid of the future of technology.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, look, we know that media is always going to go for the most shocking, the most exclusive. I mean, it makes the news because it is not everyday commonality, right? And you know, there's a market incentive also to scare people with these narratives of technology, right? And so you really have you have both extremes. You have the narrative of the techno optimism that technology is going to fix all of our human problems, you know, everything from climate change and you know, these kinds of things. And then at one end, and then on the other end, we have this as you said, the apocalypse, we're going to become an automated society, super intelligence is going to supplant us, we're going to be, dominated, whatever those storylines are. And the automation is a huge piece, and it is scary for a lot of people. And to be clear, just like any kind of advancement in technology, throughout history, we can see it. Yes, society changes. Yes, the marketplace changes. And there will be jobs that will be supplanted in some ways by technology and automated. And also what we're seeing in research, which I think is actually quite heartening and encouraging, is that we need our very real human skills more than ever. Our discernment, our ability to understand nuance and cultural context, our levels of empathy, not emulated empathy, not synthetic empathy, but actually having, empathetic and very connected situations with other humans where we have that intel, right? Because we can understand it on a very deep evolutionary social level, right?
I like the term you've used of synthetic empathy or emulated empathy. Is that really relating to the empathy that we think we're getting from, say, like an AI chatbot?
Exactly. You've got it right. And that's what we actually categorize it as. I mean, there's many different words for it, again, that's the number one challenge, I think, with AI in general. We have borrowed the taxonomy from computer science, right? We're using computational language that we're trying to wrap human understanding around. And it's very clunky and messy. And half the time, we're not even talking about the same things, right? Like, so, the majority of the population thinks AI is GenAI because it's the only thing they've been exposed to. So they conflate that. But when we're looking at human AI interactions, the verbiage or the taxonomy around it is emulated empathy, is synthetic intimacy. That's one of the terms that I love the best that came from, the preeminent Dr. Sherry Turkle out of MIT, who has been in this conversation for decades, and she's absolutely stunningly brilliant. I just got to meet her at MIT last week at the AHA event.
Well gel on that one.
I know. I'm like, you're my heroine. But yes, I mean, we have to make this distinction, right, Carolyn, because it is synthetic. It's fabricated, it's synthetic, it's mimicking our human qualities, but it's completely vacuous. It's like the ghost in the machine.
And it's interesting how we've kind of taken on these words and these narratives, and the story we're kind of talking about generative AI is really giving it human characteristics like intelligence, like emotions, like engagement. And actually it's not. It's like, as you say, it's kind of quite vacuous. It's just a machine. It's just an algorithm. It's not actually a persona. It's not sentient. It's not going to care for you. It's not going to actually be there at 2 o'clock in the morning when you need someone to physically help you with something. And it's not going to answer your phone for you. Kind of going back to what I was saying when I started this little mini rant is
I do the same thing. It's like we're like mind melding.
We've given the technology human characteristics and personality, and actually I think that's where we've all gone wrong, and where it's the mental health issues are going to come in, because those who take it at face value are going to think of it as a human context, and it's not.
Yeah, so that actually is probably one of the most concerning, I won't even call it a trend because it's something that we do as humans. We anthropomorphise, meaning we give non-animate objects humanizing qualities. And a lot of that is because we have this need to belong. We also have a hardwired need to categorize, to be able to understand things. So these are all very natural tendencies. And then what we're seeing, I just came across a Harvard Business Review meta-analysis that last year in 2024, the number one use for GenAI tools was problem solving in technical things. In 2025, do you know what it is? Had you seen this?
I have seen it, but I can't remember.
Okay. Yes. So what it is in this year, in 2025, the number one use for Gen AI tools is for therapy and companionship.
Yes, I remember
Okay.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So mic drop, because this is such a huge issue and goes exactly to what you're saying, that we are now trying to put human qualities onto these tools and relate to them. However, it is a completely asymmetrical relationship. Number one, we're giving all of our personal information, talking about all of our challenges and issues and like wanting feedback, and then uh, you know there's no judgment ever. There's no friction point. I mean, we are actually in a relationship with AI without the constraints and the boundaries that are inherent in our social evolutionary biology.
but it also doesn't help us with that personal engagement with people and working out a relationship, because it just responds to us in a non-human way, just in a predictive way. And I was also thinking about if GPT or any of those generative AI models, if the main thing that's people are using it for is therapy tools, does that mean that the world of therapy is broken? And there's not enough therapists who are helpful. B, there's too many regulations, and C, it's too expensive. And because we don't have those communities anymore like we used to, I think there's an element of need for someone or something to chat to, and we've lost trust in each other. I think we've lost the deep relationships of a community and a village, and the trust is gone. So who else do I confide in other than a chatbot? Because they're not going to judge me.
Right. And I think you're speaking to a much deeper systemic issue, and that is
Probably, yeah.
this lack of community.
Yeah.
And so it really, to me, it's less of a question about technology and it's more of a question about humanity. And
Good
how,
points.
how did we go off the rails here where we are systemically failing one another?
Yeah.
Where we are not showing up in communities. Like, what happened to traditions and rituals and supporting neighbors and actually creating relation? I do believe that it's easier in certain parts of the world where those cultures and traditions are still quite strong and cohesive. And I do sense that, especially for Western values, like I can only speak to living in the United States where I am, but we have a hyper focus on individual achievement, a hyper focus on what we attain, what we can do. You turn 18, you're out the door, making your way in the world. What can I get? What can I achieve? What can I earn? What can I do? What credentials can I have? And we forget that life is really about relationship.
Yeah, I was about to say exactly the same thing. Is from a Western perspective, it's very much about individual, and
Mm-hmm.
it's all about me and what I
Mm-hmm.
can do. It's not about my community, and having the burden of having to look after someone is a big thing. It's not. It's yeah, we kind of very individualistic, and I remember when I was a corporate, they used to say there's no I in team, but there's five in individual brilliance.
Mm-hmm.
And it was exactly that. It was about being individually brilliant and about achieving my own thing. And I'm the one who has to go up the career ladder. And we have to train leaders to bring people with them rather than being top down leadership. We almost have to help them understand and train them into that space. So I think there is a real culture around individuality. So we've lost that ability to be vulnerable to people, be vulnerable to others in our community, and serve other people
Mm-hmm.
in a more humane way, I think.
Yeah, we are really being challenged with that significantly now as these tools are becoming woven into the fabric of who we are and what we do and how we perceive the world. I don't think that there's any, fast and easy answer to it, because these are deep systems
Yeah.
that need addressing and adjusting. But I do feel like there's movements back towards that. Do you? Have you been seeing this?
I think there is actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, especially with the younger generations, I think they're starting to reject the whole thing around technology. in
Hmm.
terms of turning your phone off, spending time with other people. I think they're kind of seeing that need for community and that need for being around other people. Um, and something I want to chat about is because during initial conversation, we talked about a quiet revolution, where we kind of, as individuals, taking back control of our technology use. And heard there's always, every January, there's a digital detox, or there's a Tech Tuesday or No Tech Tuesday, whatever it is. And I always say that detoxes don't work.
Right.
Whatever kind of detox you're doing, whether it's from alcohol or chocolate or technology, it just, you very quickly go back to your old habits.
Of
And
course.
I'm kind of hearing a lot of stuff around people taking back that control and saying, actually, I'm going to turn my phone off. I am going to
Hmm.
put rules in place with my family, or work with my family, to have these tech rules, that
Hmm.
we do spend time with other people and we do engage with others. And I think that's part of what's driving all these no phones in schools and no social media
Yeah.
for under 16 revolution. It might be
Right.
doing it the wrong way, but I
Hmm.
think that's part of what's driving it.
Yeah, Jonathan hates work.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure. I mean, he's super controversial, actually. I mean, so many educators, are completely against that idea. And so here in the U.S., that's definitely a contention point. But there are countries that have adopted it.
Yeah.
And this no cell phone, I think it's below the age of 16 or something along those lines. And yeah, so I think everything that you said is true, and I feel a bit like it really is not about unplugging, because it does not work. Detox, this kind of thing. We don't live in that sort of world, and it's also not a really empowering narrative either. You know, this toxic, nefarious evil. I mean, like, what are we fighting against? I mean, like, so let's just be super transparent about it. You know, we can make choices on an individual level, but AI is infrastructure now. AI is not optional. There are very few opt-outs that we have in the Western world. It's depending on where you live, like in the United States, we really don't have many protection laws. You have the GDPR in Europe. So that's fantastic. And still, AI is part of our societies and our structures. And so what I really perceive, it's more about looking at our digital sovereignty in a way. So moving away from being a victim and moving into being an active agent in how you manage your life. And what kind of life do you want to live with this relationship? Because your digital life is as much of a relationship as any other that you have in your world. And so I think there's this tendency, for example, for us, who are in the older generations, where we had a comparison. We like to think it's either this or it's that. We're really great in creating this binary choice. What we need to understand is that the digital world for younger generations is the proxy for reality. So what I feel like we're looking at as one of the key challenges moving forward is this digital fragmentation. How we come to understand ourselves, how our younger generations come to understand ourselves through the lens of our digital lives and our digital selves. How do we navigate that? Because it's a very large problem and one that we really haven't had before. We have some data, some learnings that have come from social media, right, over the last decade. So we understand what it's like to have different publics, different audiences, let's say. But now we're talking about construction of self with AI. Okay. And so how do we manage that? Because that's the real issue. And I perceive that is about taking back and reclaiming your own agency. So I don't have to have this with me every second of my day. I can choose to go outside and be awake early in the morning and see the sunrise. I can listen to bird conversations. I can get rid of all my devices for, let's say, 20 minutes and just sketch something. I can listen to some beautiful music from a part of the world I've never visited. I mean, there's so many things that are available to us in this rich, beautiful world that we have, that we come to think that it's all about digital products. And we forget that we're still a human with a very lived, real experience, embodied experience in the
Yeah.
world.
biological experience in
Yeah.
an environment. And we also spoke about kind of the narrative around the government needing to regulate big tech so that we don't have to. And that goes back to what you were saying a little while ago about this thinking around us being a victim of big tech rather than us taking back agency and saying, actually, it's up to me to put it down. And it's up to me to say no. And it's up to me to delete that app and go outside and go for a walk or sketch something, as you say, or play with a dog or go have dinner with my husband or whatever that is. But actually, I don't have to have technology there. I don't have to take my phone with. And I wonder if there needs to be a bit more of a shift around that narrative of the government has to speak to big tech, the government, because we kind of give big tech the right to do what they want with us when we accept their terms and conditions and we sign up to the app and we become their product because we want to use their technology, but actually there needs to be a fine line between how we use it and how much of what we give them we allow them to use, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally makes sense. And I think this is one of the things that in our very quick chat that we had prior to this, we both defined as this aspect of personal responsibility. I don't know why we never talk about that. It's so easy to say governments need to regulate. It's so easy to say tech companies need to do X, Y, and Z. And yet at the end of the day, you are you, and you have to take responsibility for what you do. Everything, every little micro decision that you make in a day ends up becoming a habit, right? How do you make a habit? It's repetition, duration, intensity, and frequency. That's a habit. So if you look at your digital life, every single little click, every swipe, every moment, the 200 times that you pick up the cell phone, all of those things end up over a period of time becoming your habit. And so I'm a huge advocate for personal responsibility, and with the caveat that there are certain populations that don't have that luxury, right? Or don't have that, affordability. And I think this is important too. And this is where regulation and, monitoring of tech company and practices, I think that's where that matters, is when you're speaking about vulnerable populations. And also, I really feel as though we model these behaviors, right? So if we really want to be, positive ambassadors in this, we really can't escape looking at ourselves first, and really understanding that if we want to have healthier, more meaningful lives, then there has to be some protection of that interiority, that inner space. And if we're not tapping into that, that's going to be very difficult for us to manage the external influences that are coming in these interactions.
Exactly. I like that phrase of modeling behavior, because I think that is part of what we need to do for ourselves. And in some ways, breaking the habit is about modeling the behavior of who do I want to be? Do I want to be someone who stays on my phone all the time, or do I want to be someone that engages with others? And kind of getting myself into a habit of a better lifestyle, a better balance between technology or not technology, or engaging with other humans, or spending time in nature. But I think it's also modeling. So if you're at a company, it's modeling that behavior to other people who are working with you. But as parents, I'm guessing you kind of need to model that behavior to children rather than telling them no more screen time, or only 30 minutes a day. But then we spend ages, and I don't have children, but I see a lot of my friends say 30-minute screen time, and they spend all their time doing this for another 4 hours afterwards, and at dinner, and when they're watching TV. So it's kind of I think I like your phrase of we need to model that behavior for ourselves and for others.
Yeah, because the change starts with us. I mean, I think it's really easy to have this disempowering message to say, tech needs to change, government needs to change. Government is not coming to help us. Tech is not coming to help us. So if we're relying on that as a solution, then we're all screwed. So how do you want your world to look like? How do you want to evolve alongside technology? And it's radical to me that almost no one that I know actually asks themselves, what kind of a relationship do I want to have to technology?
Yes, I know. It's almost as though they just buy the next shiny gadget and take it on board and say, oh, look what I've got, and then show it
Hmm.
off, and that becomes part of who they are, rather than
Hmm.
questioning what they're doing with it
Hmm.
and how they're actually engaging with it and why. Why are you using it?
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, it just becomes habitual.
Yes.
And it's socially sanctioned. So I mean, our lives, everywhere you go, people are on their devices. And so I really have been appreciating immersing myself in communities where we're actually doing things like dancing or having meals together or hiking together or whatever your jam is. Doesn't, you know, whatever doesn't require that you have your face in a screen for 12 hours a day.
Exactly that. Because, yeah, there's
Mhm.
time and place for screen, there's time and place for AI or generative AI, but then there's also time and place for being human and engaging with
For
other
sure.
in the community.
Mhm.
One of the things that you mentioned, and can't remember if it was a presentation or an article you read about how in the future every technology company needs to have a psychologist as part of the key part of the team. Why do you think that's important? And why do we need more psychologists, actually, A, in business and B, in tech companies going forward?
Right. So I didn't come up with that. Actually, Pat at the AHA lab at MIT, he said that in his thesis defense, which was videotaped, and anybody can watch it on YouTube. Um, yeah, because at this stage, AI, especially when we're talking in our work lives, is no longer separate from us. It is now in our workflows, and it is not only just us adjusting to working with different types of applications or different forms of AI systems, but actually having AI clones, digital personas, coworkers, AI agents that are agentic AI that is integrated into what we do on a daily basis, showing up in our Zoom meetings, representing one of our teammates. And so we're not dealing with technical challenges. This is not about AI advancing to the next stage and learning technical prowess, right? Or trying to get proficient with new tools. It's trying to understand how are humans adapting and adjusting. And there's a lot of stuff showing up. Right? I mean, we are having major issues with trust calibration. We're having identity fragmentation. We're having, it really does become an existential crisis of meaning, of value. What are humans bringing to the table? Because if the only metrics are productivity, optimization, speed, those kinds of things, then yeah, humans are going to be left in the dust. But that's not what makes life function well. That's not what brings quality to life, nor to markets or systems. I mean, corporations are made of individuals. We can never forget that companies have a bunch of individuals working for them. At the end of the day, it's still a very human enterprise.
It is, and AI is a tool and an assistant. It's not even agentic AI is a tool and assistant. You can't kind of just let it kind of go off on its own, or you need to have barriers in place, and not many barriers in place. But also, I agree with you, there's an element of self-identity that is changing in the workplace, and there's a fragmentation of self, and there's well, where do I go next with this, and what part do I play with my role, and how do I actually make this work going forward, and what value am I actually adding? Because if there is this narrative and the story in business and in kind of the corporate world of jobs are going to be replaced, where do I fit into this? So there must be a real um, there's going to be a real need of psychologists, a, to help from a therapeutic perspective, but also from a company perspective, helping them to helping people who make up the business, as you say, to manage in a very different way to what they were before, and realign who they are as selves. And I'm kind of throwing into the mix that we take on this identity of being a psychologist or an accountant or a whatever it is, in our workplace, and that's who we become. That is, it becomes our professional identity or our personal identity. Because when the first time we meet someone, one of the first questions is, what do you do? I'm an
Mm-hmm.
accountant, or I'm a psychologist. It's a real identity thing. And where does AI take away that identity and fracture that identity? And then that was another rant from me, but it's things I haven't
Yeah.
thought of and you've kind of triggered these trains of thought in my head of there's going to be a real therapeutic need in a business context of how we engage with technology and how we engage with ourselves and the value we add.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I mean, that's already happening. And so if we look at the way that information is processed now and the way that we are sort of going about it from an occupational sense or a knowledge sense, we are now getting aggregated, generalized outputs, aggregated, generalized outputs. And so we've now created a system where that is the process and the means by which we do our jobs. And this is especially true with knowledge workers, right? So I perceive that we are moving away from this static, stored knowledge, expertise, to we are now moving into synthesis and interpretation. And because this is what our jobs are going to be, is interpreting that and discerning those outputs and really separating what is valuable and where are the nuances. This is the beauty of the human mind. We can hold those levels of complexity and nuance that machines have no ability to do. We are products of evolutionary biology. We have come to be with social constructs. No machine is ever going to have any better understanding of interpersonal relations and social contracts than we are.
Yeah, because they talk about AI being creative, but it's not human creativity. It's not able to do that diverse thinking that humans are and connect really intricate things and layer things on top of each other, like business and management and people and human behavior and evolution and ecology and all those. It can't layer those kind of things together, and it doesn't have that capability, and I don't think it ever will. I like that the way that you talk about the future of being knowledge worker is about synthesizing and interpreting what the kind of information we get, and that's a real creative cognitive wrestling with information skill that
Yeah.
that no AI or no technology is able to replicate, even if it's artificial general intelligence. I don't think it would have that level of capability. But that does
Yes.
make me wonder about the young peeps who are coming into the workplace who don't have that level of experience and kind of creative cognitive wrestling skills that we would have got working in a more corporate environment. And we've got that level of experience, we're able to do that. But what about those young people coming into the marketplace? Where do they fit in?
Yeah, I think this is a real, really big question, and it's a hot one because so I just saw a report not too long ago that said 85% of knowledge workers are utilizing Gen AI tools in their jobs on a daily basis. Now, this is with or without permission from the companies, right? And so in a lot of companies, they're not officially sanctioning bringing in Gen AI tools, but people are doing them anyway on the side, especially Gen Z and the millennials, right? To your point. And what is extremely alarming about this is, on the one side, we just gave the upside, right? The wonderful, amazing, ultimate human capacity to synthesize and meaning making, sense making of what's coming out. But we're not doing that. Statistically, even though 85% of those knowledge workers are using it, the majority of them are taking those outputs as is, with no discernment, no scrutiny, no questioning, and they are literally just depending on those outputs as truth. Now, here's another study, because I'm a huge geek. OpenAI just released a report. So their models 3.0 and 4.0. Did you see this? Yeah. So 3.0 is spitting out up to 33% of false information. And 4O is hallucinating 48% of the time.
No
So
way.
if I am a knowledge worker and I am using these models in my work to do research, to put together briefings, to whatever, maybe I'm doing content for our portfolio or social media channels or for client, whatever. Basically, if I'm relying on these tools, 50%, almost 50% of the time, I'm going to be putting out false information, erroneous research, etc.
Yeah.
Now, that's a big issue, right?
It's a huge issue. And that's another thing, because the tech companies talk about that as hallucinations, but actually it's disinformation.
It's disinformation.
And we
Totally.
need to label it as that. It's disinformation, because those who've been spreading disinformation over the years get really chastised and socially isolated and told
Mhm.
off socially, basically. But we're not
Right.
telling off generative AI. No, it's just a hallucination rather than this is almost 50% of what they're outputting is disinformation. That's mad.
Yeah, and it almost sounds like, oh, it hallucinated, kind of like your great aunt
God
with dementia.
bless.
Yeah, bless little heart, she's hallucinating again. You're right. That's exactly what it is. It's a media framing.
Yeah.
It's a media framing to take out the truth of it and not have a hard look at it, which is these are lies, they're falsehoods, it's disinformation, misinformation, it's misleading, and it can actually create harm. So we have that on the one level. And then if you think about our info stream, right? So 50% of the time, or let's just say, let's cut it down, 33%, a third of the time, we're feeding misinformation and disinformation into the
The system.
information stream, right, into the system. And so we have synthetic data then, these false through lines that are then feeding synthetic models that are then creating more and more. And then downstream, we've literally polluted the entire infoscape.
And it's
And so it's
compounding disinformation.
yeah, it's compounding disinformation. And so this kind of rolls back to what are our superpowers? Discernment and our ability to make sense out of these outputs and to be able to actually interrogate them is something that only we can do.
And
You can't, yeah, tell me.
sorry, it's almost like we need to go back to expert human sources. So
Mm-hmm,
going back to things like books with paper that are
mm-hmm,
printed in paper that have been checked and
mm-hmm.
published professionally, and those people who are putting out peer-reviewed articles rather than just blog posts that we don't know if it is disinformation or not.
Right. Oh, which is a huge practice right now, right? Like everyone, I mean, this is the bane and the beauty of the AI Wild West, right? Like you have all of this amazing room to step into, to explore and to create new theories and frameworks and to bring all of yourself into this field and know that you are just as prepared and have just as much know-how and knowledge as anyone else. And then you have the exact opposite side, right? Right, where you have all of these sort of, I call it the AI influencers who are literally, forgive the phrase, regurgitating studies and these kinds of things, putting their own twist on it. And we all kind of do that to a certain degree because we're trying to share relevant information. It's just that if we are looking at individuals to be the litmus test for truth without cross-checking any sources, we're really doing ourselves a big disservice. And also everything that we do really makes a difference because we're feeding that information ecosystem as well.
Yeah, that's true. We are feeding into it as well. And if we're feeding it disinformation, we're just as liable
Right.
as anyone else. So we have a moral responsibility to check the information
Mm-hmm.
we're putting up.
That's right. It's like old school digital literacy, but it's also like what we did, a decade ago, 15 years ago. And like when you research, you actually have to go through many different levels and compare and contrast. And I think this is where a journalistic background has really served me very, very well. Because, I'm old school journalist where the idea was to see all points of view, as many points of view as you could possibly find for a story. And I think that this is one of the skills that we will also need is this cognitive agility moving forward. We have to be able to step out of this egocentrism that we have in this individualistic mindset and really look at all of the different perspectives, because this is how we're going to arrive at whatever semblance of fact is possible.
Absolutely. Talking about that, where do you think we as AI and human integration are leading in the future? I know it's a really broad question and it can go anywhere, but what is your feeling about where we're going as humans with AI?
Hmm. Well, I mean, there's so many different levels to that question. I mean, so you in general, are you wanting to know about like work life or personal life or both?
I
Or
think probably because I'm kind of thinking about your PhD of
yeah.
algorithmic implications on identity and worldview. And
Mm-hmm.
there is an element of this is about future thinking, or what you're
Yeah.
putting out there is future thinking, and putting a baseline in
Mhm.
place of where we need to take it going forward. So that's kind of my question, is finding out your perspective of our worldview and how what the implications are really to the future of who we are as humans. Big question.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's really a great question. And, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball and I can't predict. However, if we're looking at trends that are already here, we by and large are having incredible reductions in our critical thinking skills. People are really operating on automation bias. The brain only has so much glucose on a daily basis to do more complicated thinking. My research surrounds it really works on how we show up cognitively in these human AI relationships. And, what types of thinkers are we? Are we more emotional, intuitive? Are we, more analytical, logical? It, and what I think is emerging, I don't know this to be true yet because we're still experimenting, but it does seem that certain populations are far more emotionally susceptible to Gen AI tools and to influence, manipulation, and coercion than others. And a lot of that, I believe, must be on one level brought down to the masses, although that's even a misnomer to say the masses anymore, because with niche marketing and hyper personalization, there is no such thing as the public anymore. But I think that we are in real danger of a systemic sort of anesthetizing of originality and diversity and having the freedom to really meander and explore and to become different aspects of what we might arrive at over a life's journey due to these tools, which are optimized for this hyper personalization of where you are in this moment, of who you are right now. But it doesn't allow you to become something different because it's all based on your digital footprint. So you're constantly living in your history. You're constantly giving more energy and the same to who you always were, which may not be very developed or may not be that interesting, right? I mean, so I feel like that's going to be a major challenge, because the more that we take the recommendations and the suggestions, the more that media or AI, through the form of various media, social media, and these kinds of platforms, the more that we are fed who these third parties think that we are, the less of ourselves that we actually become, if that makes sense. So I think that's going to be one of the big challenges.
That is amazingly thought, because I love the fact that you said we live our present based on our history, because the AI looks at our history and what we've done historically, but it almost traps us in our history, and
Mhm.
it makes us look backwards rather than look forwards, or kind of figure out who we are right now. And that is a bit of a worry for me. And as you say, we kind of need to be a bit more proactive in what we do and how we see how we're being manipulated, in terms of it's keeping us in this very narrow space of our historical context, rather than giving us the freedom to become and explore who we could be and what we do
Mhm.
want, and what actually we might find something else that's more interesting. And I think that's
Mhm.
what we used to have, as choice. and we could watch different movies and find something else that we like, rather than actually this is what you used to like, so therefore this is what you always like, and it's not true. Fascinating. I never thought about that before.
Yeah, I mean, it's really actually it's false choice. It's like we think that we are empowered, and we think, we have conflated this algorithmic curation and personalization as a form of agency, when in fact it is the opposite. It is actually the opposite. It's really taking third-party entities that we will never meet. We never know, because it's really a black box, right? We will never know the intentionality behind that. And there's always a driver, and it's always an economic driver.
Yeah.
And so if you look at it that way, how much agency is in that if you're constantly clicking on and watching things that are recommended for you, and you never actually have volition or will to do something else? So it may seem, I mean, we are acquiescing literally the fundaments of who we are through convenience.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And not actually thinking about it. It's kind of going back to that cognitive, bringing ourselves cognitively into the space. We're not. We're just switching off and use it as a form of escapism, rather than actively using it in a way that brings us value. We're handing over the value of our data and our time and our energy to tech companies or the media companies. Oh, something to think about.
Whoa. But I also think that, in some ways, just hang with me for a second. But I will say, in some ways, I think AI is one of the biggest gifts that humanity has ever received, because in many ways it is the funhouse mirror distorting our reflections of who we are and what we are, reflecting, refracting, distorting, amplifying. We really have the opportunity to look at ourselves and understand how we operate from the outside in, right? And I think that it could really be a grand opportunity if we were willing to utilize these knowings that are coming about, the understanding of what we're giving away, and be able to actually say, what brings my life meaning? What is it that I want to see happen here? What are the things that are worth cultivating in life that actually make this lived experience optimal, that make it fulfilling, that make it full of love and joy and presence and all of the things that we aspire to.
Absolutely. Mel, I'm very conscious of the time, and
Okay.
I could talk to you all day.
Yes. So
There's
good.
a few things I just want to kind of end off on. The first is there anything that you would really like to talk about that we haven't spoken about yet?
Yeah, I think that, we've sort of touched upon it a few times, but I really think that we are in a crisis of meaning right now. And it isn't just about the skills that we bring. It actually is a crisis of meaning in really a sovereignty of our internal lives, of our inner scape. Because where we are with technology is that it is impacting us in our inner environments as much as our outer environments. That boundary is now arbitrary. They are one and the same now. And so I really think that if we don't individually and collectively start looking at meaning making as a focus, we are in for probably some very challenging years ahead.
Yeah, agree. I like the way you put that. It's about meaning making.
Mm-hmm.
And the last question is, are there any books that you would recommend to others to read about that's kind of captures the things that you're really interested in the world of human AI psychology and the human AI interaction?
Yeah, you're going to love this. I don't read any books on this stuff because I'm far more interested in everything else that's happening in the world. I will say, I mean, obviously I keep up with, the MIT, tech review, like all those kinds of, industry sort of types of things. But in terms of books, I really loved one book by tech philosopher James Burdell. Do you know him? So his book is called Ways of Being. And so he looks at our definition of intelligence and the other forms of intelligences that we share this planet with. So animals, for example, and nature and systems. And so different views, different ways of looking at intelligence. I think that's a great book. I also am a fan of Bourdieu, the sociologist. And so he talks a lot about symbolic capital and habitus and these kinds of things. And so I'm reading a book that he did. He used Manet, the painter, as an example of how we create symbolism within our cultures. Kind of a little bit of a heady read, but I love that kind of thing. And currently I'm reading a book by Slater, who is a professor of depth psychology at Pacifica, and it is called Jung versus Borg. And he talks from a psychoanalytic perspective about the how technology, in fact, is about suppressing the shadow, which, so if you're working with these ideas, it kind of gives you like different ways of tapping in to streams of analysis, let's say, or of looking, perspective making, which is what cognitive agility is all about. It's about how do we look from different perspectives and come together and help one another through these transitions.
And you said you attended the MIT Human and AI Flourishing Conference.
I did, yeah. That was so amazing. And it's, yeah.
Are there presentations online or videos online that someone can go and watch them?
Yes, they're all streaming online now. There's a link. I'll send it to you. It's just a great day. It was the first time. I mean, what I appreciate about this endeavor at MIT is that it's the first time that we are actually looking at fundamentally the human in the human AI exchange, because up until now, most of the research has been, how do you optimize the tools? How do we figure out how to, design them in different ways? How do we integrate them? All of this. And this is actually looking at the very real human impacts in real time. So that way we have the ability to make better choices, to make better design choices, but also so we're informed in how we go about this relationship with technology.
And the fact that it's being led by MIT is a really great thing, because they are historically more technically minded than psychological human behavior kind of minded. So it's really awesome that they're focusing on that.
So it's brilliant and it's needed. And I think that part of the reason why that initiative is going to be so important is because we really do have to find a lens from an academic point of view to look at things qualitatively and quantitatively. So it's not numeracy. It's not just about numbers. How do we, make things better with numbers? It's how do we improve the quality of people's lives? This is here. We can't fight against it. We're not pushing the river. We have to be agile. We have to adapt. So that's why efforts like this are super important.
That's a great way to end up our little chat. So, Mel, thank you so much for joining me on Confessions of a Cyber Psychologist. It was awesome to catch up with you and always great to chat. And I hope we get to chat again in the future.
Me too. Thank you so much.